Of course. I do love you. Isn't that how you've made me?
Bloodborne has been out for almost a decade now, and during that time, many hours have been spent examining the themes it presents to the player. One of the most important themes is femininity, probably the most important really, and there's been a lot of great content made on this, especially Honeybat's essay, which I'm sure we've all watched, but if you haven't, there's some homework. In this video I'm going to be including my own thoughts and insights on the feminine, but I'd also like to discuss the masculine aspects of the game, which, though they play a lesser role, are still important to the game. In my view, Bloodborne presents the reality of gender. It lives within a Victorian framework in order to criticise and dispute the traditional gender roles of the time, and the roles that seem to be reappearing in the modern era through podcast grifters and the like. Despite the historical schism between genders, despite the historical crushing of femininity, we are, in reality, all human. We are all capable of the same traits and the same roles. Bloodborne shows this through its characters, and today I will explain exactly how it does that. The world of Bloodborne is based on Victorian England, not just aesthetically, it also includes their sensibilities. If you're afraid of the ghastly English today, back then was even worse. I know it's hard to believe, but it's true. And these sensibilities have to be understood before we get into the gendered world of Bloodborne, but luckily they're pretty straightforward and you probably already understand them even if you've done no personal research. Their view on gender was traditional, based heavily on Christianity and the traditional interpretation of said religion. Women were supposed to be pure companions to save themselves for marriage and to dedicate themselves to child rearing. An unmarried older woman was a spinster, was useless to society, an outcast who could provide nothing to men. And though for the first portion of the era the Victorians had a queen, she was seen primarily as the mother, not the leader. Remind you of anyone? She was also strangely against feminism when it first popped up. That's how ingrained the gender roles were. Men, on the other hand, were bachelors, businessmen, allowed to cheat and have sexual appetites as long as it was kept under wraps. Women's desire for sex, for jobs, or even entertainment was considered hysteria because, unlike men, they were supposed to be pure, angelic, obedient, and out of the way. The angel in the home is a good phrase to explain this. That's what a proper Victorian woman was supposed to be. And that's the very basics you need to understand gender in Bloodborne. If you're interested in more, there's plenty of deep historical media to consume. If you're interested in literature, then Thomas Hardy's books are a great read regarding this topic. Sorry if I gave you A-level English lit students a flashback there. Now I'm going to be breaking the rest of this video up into two main sections: how the theme of gender is shown in Yharnam itself, and how it's shown in the cosmos, the realm of the Great Ones. So let's start by exploring the sewer-ridden streets of Yharnam. Victorian standards are felt very strongly in the city of Yharnam. As you can see, even the clothing is gendered. And Ariana has different dialogue depending on whether your hunter is male or female, emphasising the point that, yes, gender is important in this world.
I'm off during hunts, and besides, this is no place for ladies.
It means something to this society. It's not like Lordran, where the chosen undead's gender has no relevance at all and is never brought up. Ariana opens the door to the idea that women are mistreated in this society, or, at the very least, treated differently. Despite the ideas of pure, sexless angels, prostitution was a known but unspoken part of Victorian life, and clearly that bleeds into Yharnam. It was an industry that women were forced into due to poverty, and considering where Ariana lives, that was likely her story too. It's an industry that ate women up and served them to men, but removed them from society forever. To be a prostitute was to be worthless. Your reputation as a woman was everything, and if you were like Ariana, then your reputation would be utterly non-existent. A marriage impossible. And her body is yours to use, maybe not in a sexual way, but instead she offers you her blood. Even when her occupation is irrelevant to the situation, to the brutality of the hunt, she is still just a tool for you, a companion to use. She's even used by the Great Ones, by the masculine entity Erden, thrown into the situation by no choice of her own. Despite her composed presentation, her acceptance of her situation, she presents femininity victimized, a powerless and vulnerable woman. And Queen Yharnam is in a similar situation. Despite the prefix of queen suggesting a place of power, suggesting a ruler, like Queen Elizabeth, she is simply reduced to the mother. And like Ariana, she is forcibly impregnated by Erden and dies in the process, giving birth to the infant Great One Murgo. Even when in a place of power, Yharnam is used as a tool by men, by her people, and by Erden. In her design, her hands are chained, symbolic of the fact that she is completely powerless. Despite being a queen, she can't fight back against anything that is happening to her. Not the pregnancy, not her baby being taken, not her blood being taken. And that's also seen through Annalise, the Queen of the Vilebloods. Annalise's entire, mostly female faction has been cut down and crushed by the masculine force of the executioners. The ghosts that linger are similar to Queen Yharnam, with bound, powerless hands, and their leader wears a prisoner's helmet. Alfred himself crushes her into a pulp. She's not even recognisable after he's finished, and she can do nothing to defend or recover herself. She's relying on you to help her when she's in this state. Like the other queen and like Ariana, Annalise represents this victimized form of femininity, weak and powerless to the whims of the men around her. She's guarded by Martyr Ligarius, the leader of the faction that murdered her people. His force is so oppressive that even as a skeletal, dead figure, he locks her away from the world. And what did the Vile Bloods do exactly, I hear you asking? What did they do to deserve the name Vile Bloods? Well, it's somewhat unclear, but it seems a scholar from Bergenworth brought a more potent version of the old blood to Canehurst, and through partaking in it, the Vile Bloods were born. So besides the thematic links between the two queens, it seems the Vile Bloods came from Queen Yharnam somehow. Perhaps it was her blood that they partook in. Because we see they share her ability to manipulate blood, as shown by Lady Maria, who is said to be a descendant of them. So history repeats itself. Queen Yharnam was bound and used by men, and so was Annalise. She and her faction were persecuted by blood purists in the Healing Church, used to further an agenda created by the upper echelon of the Healing Church. Although, there are some differences, and this is where the gender lines begin to blur, where Bloodborne begins to show the reality of gender. Annalise can talk and scheme. She's a lot more morally dark compared to the previous women who are simply our tools. She denies our hand in marriage, perhaps because she can't risk losing what power she has left. And she sends you to kill hunters and retrieve blood dregs, which, if you look closely, looks a lot like, well, you tell me. And also tell me exactly how the hunter goes about retrieving this, seed, because that's also not very clear. It's not clear if the Vile Bloods were murderous before the persecution or not, but either way, that piece of lore isn't too relevant to the thematic discussion. Whether you think that executioners were justified or not, they, a masculine force, oppressed and killed the powerful Vile Bloods, suppressing that feminine force to continue the agenda of the church. But as I said, once freed, she is not a tool for you or anyone. She uses you instead and actually desires this cosmic pregnancy that was forced upon Yharnam and Ariana. So whilst that stereotypical victimized femininity is seen in her story, she is still powerful and she is immortal. No matter what man comes to crush her, she can come back. She defies the Victorian standards in this way. She is no angel in the house, she is a murderous fiend. An immortal force of femininity presented in a dress who denies your hand in marriage, denies what society thinks of her, what the powerful church requires of her. The doll is another woman who is a tool for us, a companion. We first come across her in a traditional Victorian dress, limp and vulnerable and in a completely powerless position because she is just that. Ariana can't say no to prostitution because she has to make money, she has to live, and the doll can't say no to serving you because she knows nothing else. She is the angel in the house, the subservient, cradling wife who dutifully awaits your return home. She's the representation of traditional femininity in this game. But despite being what men thought they wanted, like Ariana, she is still dehumanized. She is just a doll. She doesn't even have a name. And yet we see very clearly that she feels emotions, that she has yearnings and desires, even if to her they seem alien and unnameable.
Moments ago, from some place, perhaps deep within, I sensed a liberation from heavy shackles. Not that I would know. How passing strange.
She was created from a man's obsession with his student. He dehumanized Maria, took her strength and Victorian masculinity, and turned her into a servant. And yes, this line,
even the doll, should it please you,
has sexual implications. The way he whispers it, the Victorian standard to keep the reality of sex a secret, it's horrifying, and maybe even more so because there are a lot of players who deny this interpretation, like Gurman's their dad or something. And if he is, I'm really sorry for you, but don't put that on me. In 2 out of the 3 possible endings, the doll continues to serve you. If you take Gurman's place, she will stay by your side and look after you. If you ascend, she will cradle you and presumably raise you. But is this a bad thing? Are traditional feminine roles prisons? Should they be escaped at all costs? No, I don't think that's what the game is saying, and I don't think so either. The doll is a victim in that she was created by a masculine oppressor and forced into a role she didn't choose for herself. But in this role, she finds meaning, she finds love for you and humans despite her position. And though in the 2 endings I mentioned, she is serving you, you are also reliant on her. Though I'm sure she has much more work to do, by the end of the game she has found her own identity, become something besides just the doll that Gurman discarded. She doesn't need him to live, she doesn't need the validation of this man who potentially violated her. She finds love and happiness with her hunter. As a companion, yes, but one who is loved and respected for who she is. Through her then, that idealized traditional woman is explored and debunked. Yes, she is dutiful, loving, everything a man would theoretically want, but she is more than that blank slate. She's more than just a doll, despite Gurman not allowing her to be more. She has feelings, she has the power to help you increase your strength, and by the end of the game, the 2 of you are equal companions. She's no longer a subservient pet. Through her, we see that an identity can be forged in traditional femininity. The woman can still hold her own power despite her role being carved by oppressive men. Because in reality, some women do want to live within the more traditional bounds of femininity, and that is perfectly fine. But these women still have their own desires and their own identities, as shown through the doll. From that, let's move on and take a look at Maria. So far, we've discussed helpless femininity, women who have been crushed by the men in their lives and forced into roles they never chose for themselves. The exception here being Annalise, as she's only somewhat helpless, more of a middle ground, and by the end of the game, the doll has found her place with you. She's no longer helpless under Gehrman. But Maria embodies something entirely different. She lives within a masculine role, she makes her own decisions and defies Victorian expectations completely. Maria was the only woman in the original Old Hunter faction, which immediately shows us that it was an uncommon path to take in this world, to be a woman and a hunter. And it's no surprise the word hunter was chosen to represent what we are in this game. It has strong masculine implications. Men were thought to be the hunters historically, the protectors, the violent side of our species. It's a smart writing decision to emphasize the role of genders in this game, and to show how the women who have this occupation truly stand out. And though Maria had the respect of her fellows, she couldn't escape her gender. She dresses in a masculine way, wearing typical hunter gear instead of a skirt. Her character is presented through strong stancing, and yet, Gehrman still minimized her into a doll. Maria's presentation reiterates the idea that Victorian gender roles were just not how it works, to put it bluntly. There are women with the desire for violence, women who fight ferociously, women who do not politely accept being disturbed.
A corpse should be left well alone. Welcome home, good hunter. I must have drifted off. What is it you desire?
Women who partook in the atrocities of history, women who were complacent to the horrors around them being perpetuated by men. Yes, she did look after the research hall patients, after she watched their heads be pumped with fluid and their bodies morph into something far from human. And yes, the patients are placed before her arena, perhaps protecting her, but she was still complacent in their suffering. Maria presents us with strong and violent femininity. And she also shows us that women were involved in war, were complacent in the ruining of other women with the oppression of them. Whilst men lead these systems, there were women like Maria who, by freeing herself, put down others. And even after everything she did to prove that her femininity is not gentle and cradling, she was still minimized into a porcelain doll by the man who thought he was owed her. Her perpetuation of the system did nothing for her in the end. And it also must be mentioned that Gehrman is not satisfied with his creation. He morphed and fit Maria back into the gender roles expected of her, and found himself wanting. Even the men upholding this society realize that, in time, it is pointless. The idea of the perfect woman that they've been sold their whole lives is not a real thing. Aileen is another character who's presented in a similar way to Maria. She's not pure, she hunts hunters. Like Maria, her story is framed by violence and the brutality of the hunt, something women should be kept from, saved from, in Victorian theory. But Aileen especially shows that women are no more ill-suited to this than men. She never gave in to the guilt, her will is strong as stone, her beliefs just as solid as any man's, and she survived all the way to old age in this brutal world. Neither her or Maria are emotionally charged messes. They are strong, they know what they've done, and they accept it. Maria accepts her place in the nightmare, accepting her punishment, and Aileen accepts the cyclical violence and death that she has decided to live and die within. Women and men are more alike than any traditional theory would suppose. We are all human, and we all have the capacity for violence. We put each other down, place each other into boxes, and form pointless expectations of each other. Men, to this day, hold women below them, think it's irrational, emotional, incapable of understanding rational sense. Sometimes I feel like we're living in a Victorian Renaissance when I see some daft podcast clip. And no, I'm not going to put an example, but you know exactly what I'm talking about. But Aileen and Maria defy misogynistic expectations completely. Women are entertained by violence, they are capable of it, and they are capable of being men's equal in every single sense of the word. We are all human despite stereotypes, historical precedents, anything of the sort. Your gender should not lock you into a specific role. Femininity has always been victimized, been put down and crushed. But it continues. Traditional forms of it can thrive, but that small Victorian box cannot contain even a fraction of what femininity is. To move on to the more masculine side of the story, I would first like to make a point about beasthood. Every original old hunter besides Maria and Gehrman fell to the scourge. Gehrman would have if he were not cradled by the moon presence. And all of these hunters were men. In fact, the majority of male characters were shown descend into beasthood, which contrasts with a large portion of the female characters who are connected to the cosmos via pregnancy or even by ascension, such as Rom. Women are generally able to handle the old blood better. Amelia only just turned, and the pregnancies we see are all cosmic in one way or another. But with that in the back of your mind, let's continue with the male characters and the concepts of beasthood. Ludwig, despite being an upstanding and respected member of the church, an important figure, a guiding mentor for many, becomes a beast. And probably the most gruesome beast in the entire game. Despite his seemingly kind nature, at the end of the day he was involved in a village massacre for the primary pursuit of power. He reveres the church and its people, he is a protector, a hunter who defends the citizens of Yharnam, but inside, he still yearns for power, for ascension. And that ugly desire emerges and takes over his entire body to morph it into something horrifying. So Ludwig embodies both the masculine role of protector and the historical figure of a good man corrupted by the search for power. And Lawrence has a similar story. He was respected and intelligent, but his primary research goal was power, ascension, not just understanding. And that's why he split from Bergenworth to form the church. He represents the ambitious scholar, a historically masculine role and an important one at that. But through his ambition, his disregard for his elders' advice, he inadvertently ruined the entire city. Through him, we see the importance of the scholar. He reflects so many men in history with an idea, an intention, a will. But through him, we also see the importance of inhibition. And I think he has a lot of similarities with fake Yosofka. I think the two are somewhat mirrored. She too is a researcher from the church with deep ambition, despite that role and trait being masculine. And her research harms others too. She seems more overtly evil compared to Lawrence, but their stories are similar. Again, Bloodborne presents the reality of gender, the reality of our similarities, not the fantasy of our differences. Master Willem is the representation of the wise elder man, the leader of a research organisation, a role exclusive to men in the Victorian age. But he shared his organisation with women. Ron was even able to ascend within the realm of his school. Master Willem represents the more respected traditional traits of masculinity. He is patient, wise, intelligent, not rash and impulsive like Lawrence. And he is untouched by the beast's scourge, unaffected by the representation of man's lust for power and blood. Men like him are deeply important in society and always have been. Wise men with experience, patience, those who share their space with women freely, who are able to share their teachings and improve society with them. Men whose goal is knowledge, not just personal power. And like how Lawrence is mirrored with the fake, perhaps himself being a failed version of Willem, I think Willem himself is mirrored with the real Yosofka. Though we don't know a huge amount about her, we know that she was a respected doctor who put research above power. She was not helping patients in an attempt to gain power, she was helping them to learn about the scourge and help humanity. She seems like a wise, guiding force like Willem, and she blurs those gender lines. I partially interpret beasthood as simply madness, bloodlust, the reality that so many men in history have turned to violence when presented with power. The power in this case being the blood of the great ones. Even an upstanding man like Father Gascoigne becomes a beast. He has an important role, a father, a provider, but regardless, he succumbs. And Alfred, who is initially presented as an upstanding kind hunter, is shown to go mad and also shown to be a crushing force in the face of powerful femininity, as I mentioned earlier. And Alfred is a very interesting character thematically. He's presented as the everyman, the average hunter, a warm and inviting man you have no reason not to cooperate with. But like German, he reflects that predatory form of masculinity that seems to hide itself so well in society. When you meet Alfred at the end of his questline, he has violated Anneliese, crushed this woman to pieces, and yes, you could interpret this as a thematic representation of sexual assault.
Smashed and pounded and grounded this rotten siren into fleshy pink pulp. There, you filthy monstrosity.
Men's violence against women is thus shown most obviously through this questline, and it holds you accountable. You led this man here, and we are complacent in allowing violent forms of masculinity to grow and dominate society. Think of all the men in power these days. Think of the things they have said about women. Think of all the things they have done to women. And think about all the women that still sit and hold these men up. Think of all the death and blood that has come from these men's will to power. I mean, we don't have werewolves running around, but we have beasts. And we brought them here. So, we can see that this game generally links masculinity with the beast scourge whilst it links femininity with the cosmos. But that does not equal to good and evil.
Fancy beasts, every last one of us.
The game presents the truth of our similarities despite focusing heavily on the historical crushing of femininity. Annalise is no angel, as I covered earlier, and we are shown women fall to beasthood, for example Amelia, though I think the game makes a point to show her as more of a victim than anything else. She's presented as a faithful, prayerful, pure woman dressed in white, but still becomes a victim of the disease to Lawrence's folly and decision to seek power, of men's decision to do so. But she upheld the oppressive systems in place, the healing church, and it did nothing for her.
Let us partake in communion and feast upon the old blood.
On the other hand, we're shown men who don't fall to beasthood. Willem is shown to be wise, seemingly immune to the curse because of his intelligence, his insight, perhaps. And Mikolash is another who, though mad, is not a beast. Through study and searching for insight, not raw power, he seems resistant to beasthood. And also there are weak and vulnerable men, take Gilbert for example. He does fall to beasthood, but like Amelia, he's more of a victim. A man crippled by sickness, not a strong figure in the slightest. He shows us that weakness is not a feminine trait. We can all suffer from it in different forms. We are all capable of the same things. Thus, though generally my statement holds true, that men are connected to beasthood and women to the cosmos, it's not entirely black and white, and again, the two do not equate to good and evil. Gender is a lot more than the Victorians thought it was, and Bloodborne shows this through its characters. But now that we've dragged our way through the dirty streets of Yharnam, let's now look upwards to the cosmos and see how the theme of gender is explored within the Great Ones. The vast majority of Great Ones we meet are female, or at least coded in that way, and that immediately contrasts with the sight of gender we're presented in Yharnam, where most people in power are male. Women in the cosmos are powerful entities. They are worshipped and sought out by humanity. They aren't just given power through a title, they hold it in their hands. Every move is framed by an incomprehensible eldritch will. And yes, they are linked strongly to their desire for children, but so are the male Great Ones. It's not a feminine trait in this world. So from that alone, we can see that the traditional traits placed onto women in Yharnam, weakness and subservience, are absent in the cosmos. The moon presence is the best example of this power, linked strongly with femininity through the imagery of flowers and the name Flora, who is a Roman goddess. She enables the hunt to go on. Her moon accelerates beasthood. Her will, her desire for the hunt to continue, has no regard for the crushing masculine force shown to us so many times during the game. There are no executioners with the power to hunt her down and kill her, no role of subservience expected of her. Gurman, the man who victimized the doll, has the roles flipped with Flora. She has the power, she controls him, practically enslaves him like he did the doll, and she has no regard for the Victorian attitudes he is supposed to hold over her. But Flora is also linked inherently to beasthood. She's in a strange spot between the cosmos and the beastly scourge. Thematically, this works to divide gender in the cosmos and Yharnam further. As I mentioned, men are linked to beasthood, but even this fails to apply to this higher realm. The scourge is enabled by Flora. It's associated strongly with men, but born from a woman. And during her boss fight, she moves like a beast, like a wild animal, despite her Great One status. Again, the gender lines blur. This ascended creature has no regard for our sensibilities or our expectations. Rom too is a powerful entity, despite the actual boss fight being, lackluster. She has the power to hide the blood moon from us. She acts as a kind of shield against the Great Ones, which is shown by the fact Ariana becomes pregnant after Rom is defeated, and the amygdala-ridden town of Yargul is revealed. In this then, she embodies the masculine role of the protector like Ludwig and the old hunters once did. There are different interpretations of her lore, who she was aligned with, why exactly the Great Ones were being guarded against, etc. But it doesn't change the thematic purpose of her role in regard to gender. And if a smelly old Victorian were to play this game, they would be appalled by the fact that the one human we know to have ascended was a woman. That too is a specific decision to defy the framework, to show that women too have powerful capabilities. Now let's move on to Cos, who was praised as a god by the hamlet, not just as queen by title, but respected on a true level by the villagers. We know from the Cos parasite that she washed up on shore physically dead, but as a Great One, I think it's safe to assume her soul continued living or something like that. And thus, she blessed the hamlet, as we know the Great Ones are sympathetic in nature. The villagers called for her to help, praised her, and she responded. They were able to live off the parasites from the sea and perhaps were brought closer to the cosmos due to it. This power is of course unfeminine, according to Victorians. Their god, the Christian god, is labelled the Father. He is the one who provides and sustains the village, the world. This can be applied to all the female Great Ones, but I think it makes the most sense with Cos because she really was praised and loved by this village, not just sought after for power. She was their god, their provider. Even by Mikolash, long after the hamlet has been massacred, she is praised and called out to.
Ah, Cos. Or some say Cosm. Do you hear our prayers?
Yet, That theme of men taking advantage of women, treating them terribly in history, still appears here. The village was massacred, her physical form desecrated, every warm body torn apart in an attempt to find eyes, to find power to commune, to ascend. This group of primarily male hunters sought power as usual through violence and destruction, not through insight, and it cost them. Both Kos and Queen Yharnam show that no matter the power you hold as a woman, you will be crushed by masculine violence and desecrated by men if it means they gain something. But Kos didn't die despite their efforts, much like the Queen, who herself is linked strongly to the cosmos. Kos's spirit as a great one, her soul, her insight, however you want to interpret it, turned the tables on these oppressive hunters just like Flora. She trapped the old hunters in the nightmare, forced them to suffer eternally for what they did to her and her unborn child. She shows that womanhood is continual, not weak and finite like traditions claim. It will find its foothold regardless of how history has treated it, continues to treat it. And again, it was a very specific decision to make Maria the regretful one of the group, the one who didn't turn into a beast. She shows that women have hurt each other in history, continue to do so. Queen Elizabeth thought feminists were hysterical and crazy, but we can understand each other after the fact. We are a part of the problem in many ways. As a more modern example, women treat each other terribly online. I know you guys have seen it. Many have had experiences getting put down by other women who are, for some reason, trying to side with unlikable men. And I could have used the term pick me there, but internalized misogyny is a pervasive issue that starts all the way in teenagehood when you have your I hate pink phase. And I think pick me as a term is just an extension of that. Am I calling Lady Maria a pick me girl? No. The modern comparisons are worth mentioning, but I'm not minimizing her character into that. Abritus, then, is somewhat similar to Kos as they both coexisted with humanity. She's immediately cast as womanly with her title Daughter of the Cosmos. And Abritus was found by the Healing Church and used to further their knowledge of the Great Ones, but she isn't initially hostile towards you, thus it's safe to assume she was working with them, not being owned by them. Abritus defies that Victorian expectation of female ineptitude by being a source of scholarly knowledge. Through her, the church was able to expand and grow, whilst in Victorian England, women weren't even able to be students until around 1860. And she is a partner to the church, not a subservient pet, not owned by anyone or any organisation. She holds the power in the situation. She is the Great One. Her blood and insight allows for the church scholars to continue their research. She is no confined prisoner like Annalise. Her body is not readily available like Ariana's. She is a partner with the masculine force of Yharnamite scholars. So far, we can see simply that gender roles are not observed in the cosmos. The women do have some traditional traits such as the desire for children, but so do the men. They are powerful creatures that loom over humanity. They have no regard for our stereotypes, and through them, Bloodborne shows us how things really are. Yes, these beasts are eldritch and alien, but they are also closer to us than we think at first glance. They are sympathetic to our plight, willing to work with us, willing to help us, as some of them were us. They are an elevated version of humanity that no longer cares for our useless gender distinctions. Yes, we present differently, men and women and everything in between have differences, but we are all capable of the same traits. We are all capable of strength, of scholarly ambition. Many of us desire children, many of us act like animals. Dividing specific roles and traits into masculine and feminine is something the Ascended don't even think about. But there's also something else worth mentioning about the femininity in the cosmos. I've shown the gender roles are different between worlds, but the visuals are too. In Yharnam, women wear skirts and gendered clothes, but in the cosmos, a woman has no physical requirements. So let's look deeper into these designs because I love them a lot and they are really worth delving into individually. Flora is a skeletal beast with no Victorian feminine qualities. She isn't rocking a skinny corset-trained waist, she doesn't have flowing tentacles to represent a skirt, she certainly has no Victorian bust. The only thing that could be interpreted as feminine is her flowing headpiece, the tentacles I think, that do give her the silhouette of flowing hair. But even then, that is against the Victorian standards. Women's hair was seen as sexual, putting your hair down was a seduction. By all of our earthly standards, this feminine entity has barely anything to tie her to the traditional woman. Because there is no such thing. Women do not look a certain way and thus become a woman. Womanhood, girlhood does feel this way sometimes, and yes, transgender women are included in this conversation entirely. To be a woman can be this, can be wearing dresses and doing your nails, wearing pink and respecting what society expects of you. But it can also be this. The Victorians tried desperately to tie gender to specific expectations. This is what a woman looks like and this is what a man looks like. And today, society is repeating that, trying to apply that to transgender people in particular. As I said, history repeats itself, I suppose, but Is there not something to be learned? Are we going to constantly try to place people in boxes, endlessly try and oppress them into submission? Or are we going to be more accepting of everyone and respect that everyone has the choice to perform and present however they want? Every single person should be able to live life like Flora. Maybe not the kidnapping of old men part, but holding your own power and showing up to the party looking exactly how you want to, not how everyone expects you to. That applies to everyone. Of course, the other feminine Great Ones are further evidence of my point. Rom is completely disconnected from the traditional feminine look, she's literally just a spider creature. Abritus's lower half can somewhat shadow a skirt, but to me they look mostly like tentacle legs. She too has very little in common with that traditional look. She has a visceral appearance like Flora, organic in a disturbing way. She is no angel in the house, no secretive Victorian woman. She is a monster with bared flesh and alien appendages, and I love that for her. But Murgo's wet nurse does break the pattern as she's made of cloth, not flesh, and linked entirely with motherhood. The imagery of jewels and prams and deep purple presenting that feminine imagery. This creature I think is the best representation of motherhood in the game, which, though I haven't gone deeply into it, is an extremely important theme. Motherhood was the ultimate goal for Victorian women. It was their job, what society expected of them. But it became them. You aren't Ariana anymore, you're the mother. You're not Queen Yharnam anymore, you're just the mother. Your face, your identity is no longer important, reflected in the wet nurse's design. She has no identity of her own, no name, no face, just the wet nurse. She clearly borrows from Victorian expectations of being a mother, with her body being swaddling cloth, being made up of human concepts. She's the Great One closest to Victorian standards. But motherhood isn't treated this way in the game. It isn't reduced to what the Victorians thought of it. We know Ariana, we know the Queen, we know Cos, we know them as more than just the mother. And though she seems close to the traditional sensibilities, the wet nurse shows us that mothers are not pure helpless angels. She wields sharp scythes, she brutally attacks you to defend the child in her care. Motherhood can be violent and bloody, and it can be for a child that you did not birth. I think the wet nurse looks so different from the other Great Ones so that she could reflect this theme, reflect the minimization of women into mothers, and reflect the reality that mothers too are capable of deep violence, and that, in a way, motherhood is a form of ascension. The amygdalas are sort of the outlier here. They don't seem to have any feminine or masculine leanings, they're just creatures from beyond. I think in terms of gender, they're there to make the point that in the cosmos, it's very, very different. Though I call most of these guys women and men, our definition of what that means is very different to what it means to them, though I think I've outlined that already. When you're an ascended Great One, gender doesn't really matter, and for the amygdalas, I suppose it doesn't matter at all. Despite femininity being the primary theme of this game, it doesn't undermine masculinity at the same time, just puts it on the back burner. Formless Erden is the primary piece of evidence for this point. His presence is constant in this game, it underlines a lot of the lore whilst also not feeling oppressive in the way masculinity feels in earthly Yharnam. He's actually a strangely positive force. The only true safe place for NPCs in this game is Erden's chapel, named after him and held together by his worshippers, and you'll only really know about him if you look. It can be interpreted that the chapel is safe due to his influence, his sympathetic nature perhaps, and the trait of the Protector comes in here, the broad masculine force that shelters and protects the mostly women inside his chapel. It's also implied he is the strongest Great One. He is so ascended that he doesn't even have a need for a body anymore. Masculinity then is ever present in the cosmos, despite femininity being more clearly there. Men too have a place in the divine, have a place in the ascended, and this game is in no way saying it's only a place for the feminine. And as I've mentioned, Erden too desires a child. He desires fatherhood, and every baby besides the orphan that we see in this game is his, or implied to be his. Murgo is implied to be his child due to its formless nature, and Ariana's baby Great One is stated to be his through the description of the umbilical cord you collect from her. This brings us to another point though. Back again to the power men hold over women. Erden is the most powerful man in the game, and though he doesn't degrade femininity in the same way the male Yharnamites do, he seems largely benevolent, he still forces himself upon the women of Yharnam. Lore-wise, I'm sure he sees it differently as he's a Great One who doesn't comprehend humanity very well, but if we break it down to the basic story beats, it's reflective of a powerful man forcing himself onto a weaker woman. Ariana is disgusted by this cosmic baby she now has to deal with.
It can't be. This is a nightmare.
And why exactly was she chosen? Because she was seeking shelter in Erden's chapel, because she's a prostitute, because she has some vague royal lineage? Does that mean he had the right to force himself on her? Of course not any rational person can see that, but unfortunately there are men who think this way and have done so historically. Queen Yharnam's situation was likely similar to Ariana's, impregnated by a Great One not from her own choice. You don't see her trying to commune with Erden to unite with some cosmic lover. You see her trying to help her child. And false Yasofka is implied as well to be pregnant with his child due to the rune she holds and the fact she becomes pregnant at the same time as Ariana, which is when the blood moon descends after killing Rom. And though she takes it slightly differently than Ariana,
It's rather rapturous.
it doesn't appear that she directly asked for this. She was researching Ascension and thus likely researching Erden. Does this mean he was entitled to her? So through Erden we're shown somewhat benevolent masculinity. It can be a good force. And I think that's shown through Master Willem as well. He's a better example, really. But Erden is also used to show the oppression of women is a constant. Whilst the male Yharnamites knew exactly what they were doing to women, subordinating them and using them, Erden perhaps doesn't understand this concept. He doesn't oppress and use these women through malevolence, yet his actions remain oppressive. Many men uphold harm against women and hurt women without even realizing, without even considering it. Many men think they deserve a woman because of some good deed. These realities, I think, are reflected through formless Erden. There's also a theory that Master Willem ascended after the game, or perhaps was very close to ascension. His age in this game is presented very strangely. He seems to have not changed at all from his cutscene with Lawrence, and there are item descriptions which read as though he were long dead. He also bleeds white like a Britus, suggesting he may have already ascended into kin or was on the way to that. Plus the strange growths over his body look far from natural. If you have these, get help. The game works then to show again Master Willem's importance. His role as a mentor, as a teacher, as a wise man is valuable, more so than any of his rash contemporaries believed. And through him and his knowledge, humans were able to ascend. Like Erden, he shows that there is a place for masculine forces in the higher realm. And to reiterate, it doesn't come down to good and evil. Every character we come across in this world is morally grey, besides maybe the chapel dweller. Even Master Willem, who I've kinda glazed, played some kind of role in the Fishing Hamlet massacre, likely ordering the hunters to the area. There are evil men and women, there are those who lie somewhere in between. But the point this game makes is that we are all capable of the same things regardless of our gender. The game makes this point extremely clear. These traditional roles, the male protector, the female angel in the house, they are irrational. They mean nothing. We of course have our differences, but we are more similar than people realise. Women struggle with the same things men do and vice versa. Femininity has been historically victimised, yes, but that is not due to some innate flaw in women. It's due to patriarchal systems which hurt men too, which force men into roles they may not want. By perpetuating these cycles like those who live in filthy old Yharnam, we are stunting our growth. We are forcing people to be something they never wanted to be. Thank you all for watching. This was a lot harder to bring together than my previous two videos, because for them I could just kind of yap about gameplay, but for this, I really had to lock my 3 brain cells in. But it was fun. I hope it starts some interesting discussions. Let me know what you think in the comments, of course. There's way more to say really, but to pack it all into a single video would be very difficult. Because even with this singular theme of gender that is still really broad, and media analysis is way more difficult than you'd think. Also, I know I focus primarily on just the male-female experience, but there's a lot that could be said about gender fluidity, especially when it comes to the Great Ones. And I want to thank you all for 2,000 subscribers. I know it's not the biggest number in the world or anything, but it means the world to me because I've wanted to do this for so long, and the fact that you guys are enjoying the content, the little of it there is so far, it means a lot, so thank you. My next video is going to be a sequel to the Minecraft video that I made. This one is going to be entirely focused on the mods because a lot of you suggested some actually scary mods that I'm definitely going to try out. I've got them all downloaded already. Even the Cave Dweller, you guys said I was a bit too harsh on him, so I'll definitely be trying that again, and hopefully I'm more fair because the last video was more like vanilla focused, but this one will be entirely mod focused. And that is all for today. Remember to subscribe, check out the Twitch and the Discord, both in the description, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.